Mauricio Pochettino has been sacked. There should be no better evidence that Premier League teams don't tolerate losing on any scale than Tottenham Hotspur sacking the best manager they've had in almost 50 years. Pochettino led Spurs to a Champions League final and turned the small London side into a contender in the world of super teams and gross amounts of money. But now the brass at Tottenham have chosen to replace their small-town hero with pretty much the exact opposite, the chosen one, Jose Mourinho. But while Mourinho brings with him one of the most successful track records of any active manager, the question we all should be asking is whether this move will actually have the desired effect. So let's discuss that very question. Spoiler alert, no. Mourinho's track record speaks for itself. League titles in 4 different countries, including 3 in the Premier League, League Cups in 4 different countries, a Europa League, 2 Champions Leagues. He's the youngest manager ever to win 100 Champions League games, and he's the only manager to have won every single title in every league he's competed in. Everything you want from a manager at a club that has firmly put themselves in the top 6 discussion. It's easy to forget, Spurs have far less of a history than any of the other, quote, top 6 clubs that we know today. From Arsenal's Invincibles to Liverpool and Man U running roughshod over England for the last 50 years, to Chelsea's back-to-back league titles under Mourinho, the other 5 clubs have distinct periods in their history where they had real claims to being the best club on earth. Spurs have no such stretch, but it was Mauricio Pochettino who brought them to relevance. Now Spurs have pulled the trigger and have done it what all the other top 6 clubs have done: hire a world-renowned manager with an absolutely massive name. But Pep Guardiola and Jurgen Klopp, Mourinho is not. And there's a chunk of Spurs fans that look at Mourinho's track record, which, as I say, does speak for itself, and justifiably say Mourinho has done more than either of those men. And indeed, he's done more than any of the top 6 managers at their current clubs. But all accomplishments are not created equal. And just like the sun set on the dominance of managers like Bob Paisley and Sir Alex Ferguson, so too does it set on the dominance of Jose Mourinho. Let's look at the league titles he's won throughout his career. He won titles in Portugal, England, Italy, and Spain, and was showcasing his incredible ability and versatility until
Messi caressing the ball to Iniesta. He has Villarreal outside. Oh, plays it inside. Great tackle, but no, he's finished off by Jamie.
Before the year 2010, Mourinho won 6 league titles and 2 Champions League titles. After 2010, he won 2 league titles and 1 Europa League title. That seems like a weird year to suddenly give up on your dominant grip on all of Europe. Was he starting his preparations for the potential end of the world in 2012 early? Well, in reality, it was the dawn of one man. Pep Guardiola began with Barcelona in 2008, and by the 09-10 season, he had brought in the players he wanted. Guardiola, more so than any other man in the 21st century, is responsible for changing the game of soccer worldwide. He invented concepts that remain standard to this day, like inverted wingers and one-touch build-up. He is the man most responsible for putting maybe the most dominant player in the history of the game in the position where he was most successful. Guardiola's impact at Barcelona can still be felt today, as the game morphed from a war of attrition and physical battle, the style Mourinho was famous for, to the truest embodiment of the phrase, the beautiful game. And while Mourinho was able to stem the oncoming onslaught of Guardiola's Barcelona when he was with Madrid in 2011-2012, he left Spain the next year and watched from England as Guardiola's revolution took hold. Now Mourinho is taking over his 3rd club in England, while Guardiola's revolution has already changed the English game. Mourinho held the record for most points ever in a Premier League season, a record City has now broken twice. Mourinho had the highest payroll in England, a record City has sent so far into space American satellites couldn't find it. And now Mourinho comes back to England, and he meets a new revolution. He meets a Liverpool squad that, after knocking on the door for a couple of years, are champions of Europe and hold an 8-point lead at the top of the Premier League. This is not the Liverpool that Mourinho faced off with when he was at United. Jurgen Klopp has taken Pep Guardiola's innovative system and brought it to the even more modern age by adding a high press and more fluidity and freedom in the attacking third. So now that Mourinho's back, can his style take hold in the English game the way it's constructed now? No. Mourinho's style has always been defensive. The term park the bus gets thrown around almost constantly, but Mourinho's style is actually more refined than that term would suggest. His attacking tactics are based around an old school concept. He uses midfield triangles to overrun the opposition, a strategy that even led to the innovative tactics of Pep and Klopp. Mourinho has always focused on scoring first and playing with the lead, which is not a terrible strategy in all honesty. Unfortunately, when he's been in charge of England clubs, he's showcased a trend that would be completely out of place in today's game. Almost every year Mourinho has been in the league, he's scored right around 70 goals. It's actually remarkable how almost every single year he's scored exactly 72 or 73 goals. There's something to be said for that level of consistency. But that's less than 2 goals a game. He outscores his opponents by an average of 1 to 2 goals a game. Mourinho runs an incredibly tight gauntlet, and he's never won the Premier League by more than 12 points, and he did that in 2005. On the other hand, City, Liverpool, and even Chelsea rely on a far less rigid and demanding strategy to rack up points in the league. Of course, their numbers are inflated by picking up massive wins over the bottom teams in the league, but the fact that Mourinho's weren't when he was managing just shows you how he plays compared to those other clubs. Chuck in the fact that the Premier League is deeper with talent than ever, with Leicester in second and teams like Sheffield United and Wolves ahead of or tied with giants like Man U and Arsenal, and you get a recipe for disaster when it comes to Mourinho's style. If even one game doesn't go perfectly to plan, Mourinho's teams are susceptible to counters and are sometimes just flat out unable to score if teams control possession in the midfield. And what is it exactly that managers like Klopp and Pep do so well? And if all that wasn't enough to send Spurs fans into a depressed state, Tottenham right now has given up 16 goals through 12 games. They're not exactly the best defensive team right now. The sad fact is, Spurs look far more similar to the Man United squad Mourinho took over a couple years ago than the Chelsea squads he previously commanded. And just from a culture standpoint, Pochettino felt like a Tottenham guy. A guy who didn't give a toss about the fact Spurs had a smaller fan base worldwide and a much smaller budget than their top-level contemporaries. He embodied the personalities and the feelings of Tottenham fans. He was a match made in heaven for a club that seemingly had no business being where they were. I don't mean to look at his reign with rose-tinted glasses. He failed to win any trophies, and his top accomplishment was making the finals of the Champions League once. But it's impossible to deny he created a culture that fans loved. Mourinho is pretty much the opposite. He's managed the biggest clubs on earth, and he brings that mentality to a club that's always prided themselves on being the most successful little fish in an ocean of sharks. But I don't want you to leave this video thinking I hate Tottenham and want them to fail. I don't. The Premier League is better when Tottenham is good. But the Premier League is also better when the teams at the top play an attractive style of football, and when the differences in the attitudes and mentalities of the clubs and their fan bases shine through. Mourinho tends to make those things not happen. And without a radical change in his mentality and tactics, which I don't see likely, I really don't see it getting any better.